Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Sales. If you're looking for actionable insights and real-world tools to turbocharge your sales starting tomorrow, well, you're in the right place. Your host, Kay Miller, earned the affectionate nickname Muffler Mama when she sold more automotive mufflers than anyone else in the world. In this podcast, Kay will talk to another superstar woman in sales as they reveal uncopyable strategies you can use to rack up more leads, snag dream clients, and take your sales numbers through the roof. Stay tuned and get ready to make more sales and how about this? More money.
I have been really looking forward to today's guest, Rebekah Wagner. Rebekah is a corporate recruiter for Holman, a renowned global automotive company. After being newly divorced with small children, Rebekah initially began her journey at a local Audi dealership in Colorado in a minimum wage entry-level position. After being quickly promoted through the ranks, she now handles corporate recruiting for various Holman divisions across the country. Rebekah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kay. I'm very excited to be here.
I am so happy that you have been able to come on. You were highly recommended by Katie O'Neill, who I have had in the past as a guest. And of course, she's awesome. You guys are obviously fans of each other. And I love it when women are supporting women. And you sound like you guys have a great relationship. So that is very cool.
Absolutely.
You have an interesting story. Like as I mentioned in the intro, you were kind of through necessity forced to go back to work. And you started in an entry-level position. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about how that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got married young, had kids fairly young, pretty much right out of college. And probably like around almost 10 years ago or so, was going through a divorce. And for the first time of being a parent, I was responsible for taking care of my kids, financially, all of their needs. And that was intimidating and scary. I had been working at a domestic violence safe house, while my kids were little, but it was more like as needed. So obviously did not pay the bills. And I just needed anything. I needed anything that could show that I could provide for my kids and showing that stability. So I started applying for jobs and ran into, you don't have enough experience. Didn't matter the education I had. We need you to have 10 years experience. I'm like, okay, well, I'm 30 years old. I've been, just being a parent for the most part. And it was a difficult situation to be in. So I had to adjust my thinking at that time. Was like, okay, I'm probably not going to find at this moment what I'm wanting or needing. So I need to just suck it up, start somewhere. And I knew if I could start somewhere, that would be the path to wherever I was going to go from there. I could grow upon that. And there was an entry-level vehicle acquisition specialist for Audi in Boulder, Colorado. And went in, they were like, do you know anything about the automotive industry? And I remember,
I drive a car.
That's exactly what I said. I said, I know how to drive a car. And I think they were like, okay. Sure.
But that's all, it is such a conundrum because you need experience to get jobs but you need a job to get experience. And I think a lot of people are in that situation. So your way of dealing with that was, like you said, suck it up, just say, I'm going to start at the bottom. And just already what I know of you, you probably were confident that you could advance and get to a much higher position.
Absolutely. I knew I could work hard. I knew I could learn things. I just needed someone to say yes. And I knew once I had that first yes, I would be fine. So I did. I started off vehicle acquisitions. It was pretty, minimum wage. We were able to build in like a commission plan a little bit, which helped for purchasing vehicles for our used car department at that point. No one had done that position before. So it was a new to our company at that time through Kelley Blue Book buying program. And so we just built that out a little bit, but it still just wasn't enough. So the managers had mentioned several times, like, well, have you thought about sales? And I remember specifically when one of our F&I managers was like, Rebekah, I really think you should do sales. My only experience with cars and sales was on the other side of the desk buying the car. And it was not a pleasant experience. There was a lot of hesitancy that I had just due to my own personal experiences that I've had. And just I think the stigma of the automotive industry historically.
Right. You hear about the used car salesperson, right? Or it's used cars salesman, but of course,
totally
either one. But you're right. Knowing what it's like to buy a car, I think if you can draw on that experience in a lot of cases, you're like, okay, I know what I don't want it to be like, right?
Exactly. And that's, I think it took me a little bit, about 7 or 8 months before I was like, okay, I will do this. I need to do this for myself. And I realized it was just fear holding me back, fear of so many things that weren't actually even realities. Like I realized how much control I had over the experience I was going to provide people. I didn't have to be what everyone else or what I perceived everyone else was doing or what I thought I was supposed to do. But my only stipulation was I told my manager, I will sell cars. I need the weeks I have my children, the evenings I have my kids, I need to be out by 5 to at least pick them up, 5:30. And they were like, done. And I was like, all right, well, I was hoping that was going to be my no. And then I'd, feel justified in not going down that route. But they didn't. They were very accommodating.
But didn't you also say that at times they let you bring your kids into the dealership?
Absolutely. So there were many times where I didn't want to give up half a car deal or a car deal, or I was in the middle of a car deal and I'd leave, go pick up my kids, come back. They would be hanging out at the, car dealership. And I think if you ask some of them now, they're like, we miss you working the dealership. They thought it was so fun to be there, see what mom was doing, make friends with everyone I was working with. And
it might have been a plus to selling. You've got kids running around.
Absolutely. They were very accommodating and I feel very blessed that I had a place to work that supported the human part of me too, which was being a mom and those obligations. I think that really meant a lot to me. And it kind of played into the, a passion of mine is just people and connection with people. And that was working for an employer that was supporting that part of me. It was so much easier for me to pass that along to my customers.
That's great. And, that's something that women face way more than men. The child rearing usually falls on the women, and that is changing somewhat. But that is really important that you had an employer who was willing to work that in for you. That's huge. But also, it speaks to the value you were bringing because they didn't want to lose you.
Thank you. I would like to think so. I did sales for a couple years. And, learned a lot. I was so nervous doing sales. I really had no experience in that. So that's where my fear was coming from was I'm afraid I'm going to screw it up, going to say something wrong, do something wrong. I don't know the product as well, starting off, but I knew people and I knew that if I could provide an experience for them, if I could work together with them, they're walking into the dealership for a reason. I'm not cold calling them. They're there. Do they always know what they want? No. But if we could work together and I could connect with them, they're more apt to tell me what they're looking for, what is actually important to them. And that's when I'm able to shine as the expert, as the sales consultant to help guide them to what is best for them. And sometimes I was very different than what they came in thinking they were needing or wanting. And sometimes I learned a lot too. I learned to ask different questions and how to ask those questions because what they're telling you sometimes they want is just on the surface. So if we can penetrate that surface level conversation, we really find what's going to make them happy, not something they're going to go home and have buyer's remorse. They're going to walk away with all their questions answered, feeling comfortable, feeling excited for their purchase. They're going to tell their friends, tell their family, give me a good survey, and come back and see me the next time they need
That's
something.
important because you are the expert. I remember Katie talking about that as well, and a lot of other salespeople, that you are the expert, and the customer might think they know what they want, but they might be better served with something else. So if you can ask good questions, like you said, really dig down deep and find out what will really benefit them the most. And of course, you don't want somebody to be unhappy with a car. You don't want them trying to bring it back or trade it in or not come back for their second car. So
Absolutely.
it's not only the right thing to do, but it's good for your business.
Absolutely. And I think I remember someone telling me that every customer deserves a champion, like somebody to validate that they are making the right choice. And honestly, nobody needs an Audi. Like that is something that they want, they desire. So why not be their advocate? Like we're there to help them get what they truly want, and help them feel happy in there. So like that was my approach to it was they're here. I'm their like cheerleader right now and their guide. Like let's work together and get you what's going to be the best product for you and your family and your situation, what you're looking for, whatever that is.
And it sounds like that's a good way for you. That might have been one of the ways that you overcame your fear. Instead of focusing on the fear, you're focusing on the customer. And, fear really is about ourselves, right? And if you're
Absolutely.
thinking about the customer, then that takes the fear away. What is that? Are there other things that you did to overcome that fear? Because one of the things you said when we talked last week is just, if something scares you, take action.
Yeah. That's something I think I've done in every area of my life is I realized I had a lot of fears that were holding me back. And in the end, I was the only one that was losing. And so I've really learned if I feel fearful of something, of a situation, of a new experience, to really ask myself, like, what is the worst thing that can happen? Where is this fear coming from? Is it coming from an actual place of like, hey, I need to protect myself? Like it's not a good place to be? Or is that fear just discomfort masking itself as fear? And 95% of the time, it is just discomfort. It's unfamiliar territory. It's something I either haven't done before, I think I can't do, whatever that may be. So that's what I do. I'm like, all right, let's do this. And which is kind of how I got out of sales somewhat, is after being in sales with Audi for about 4.5 years, a corporate job opened up, which was an employee engagement, on the employee engagement side for our corporate side of Holman. And the biggest part of that job was public speaking.
Really?
And it was giving big meetings, a lot of company updates. And I was recommended for the job, and I almost didn't take it because I was terrified that I couldn't public speak. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know. And again, I was like, I'm not good at speaking. I'm not good at public speaking. Okay, let's do this job. Like the only way I'm going to get better is by learning and by doing it. And the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to screw up. I'm going to screw up.
You're not going to die.
Nobody's going to die because I screwed up something. Like that's not. And so I was like, okay, like that's kind of silly, like to hold myself back from like a step in my career because I'm afraid of something that the worst thing that could happen is I screw up. My job isn't on the line. Nobody's dying.
Public speaking is one of the number one fears out there. I mean, some people say they'd rather die in a fire than go up on a stage and speak. So good for you for just overcoming that. And to a certain extent, as you're saying, you just have to do it. And even if you are afraid, the only way to get, take that fear away is just doing that, expanding your comfort zone, changing that language that you were using that said, I can't speak, I'm not a good speaker. And once you do it, then you can say, I am a speaker. I am a good speaker. And I'm sure at the beginning you weren't as good as you were a year later or
Absolutely.
now. So good for you for doing that.
Absolutely. And I think, the more we can at least for myself, the more I can push myself out of my comfort zone, you're your own biggest supporter. You only know the depths of your struggles, the depths of your fear, and to see yourself on the other side of that is incredibly impactful. You kind of feel like you've built your own superhero. Like, I can do this. Like, I can do anything because you've seen what you yourself overcame. And even as a parent, that's something I could only hope to pass on to my kids is, the ability to just not live your life in fear.
Yeah, those are all great pieces of wisdom.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the acclaimed book, Uncopyable Sales Secrets: How to Create an Unfair Advantage and Outsell Your Competition by Kay Miller. If you want to make more sales, you need to read this book. We'll even get you started with a free download of the first 2 chapters. Go to uncopyablesales.com/chapters to grab this offer right now.
Speaking of kids, I have to say, you mentioned that you are one of 10 kids. That's a lot of kids.
I am the oldest.
A lot of siblings. You're the oldest.
I am the oldest.
Do you think that some of your, your drive, your resilience, other parts of your personality come from being in that position?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a big responsibility being the oldest of 10. A big family in general comes with a lot of critiques. A lot of people make a lot of assumptions and a lot of comments on things that really have nothing to do with anything. But also there's a lot of just learned life experience that you learn from having a dynamic of a big family, lots of personalities, lots of just a lot going on at all times.
Yeah, probably some drama too.
Absolutely.
Regardless, I mean, when you say you have to be your own cheerleader, that is so true. And so many successful salespeople, probably successful everyone, we still have to get over that negative self-talk. And it sounds like you've really worked on that, and it's served you very well. I did want to talk about, what you told me about being diagnosed with ADHD and how that has affected you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as an adult, just realizing, honestly, going back to some of those fears and hesitancies where I knew that I didn't always do things the way other people did them. And being in different roles, I was like, okay, I'm getting to the same outcome, or sometimes even a better outcome, or having a different lens on things. And I remember in meetings, I would mention something, and they're like, oh, I never thought about that aspect of it or that part of it. And it was, I think, the first time that I was realizing that it wasn't a negative. But there were some challenges that came with that. I would realize I could hyper focus on tasks for hours. Like, sometimes I could get 8 hours worth of work done in 3 hours. Like, I would just be able to power through. But then there was this almost I would hit a wall, and I would have this just could not get going again. It was almost like I burnt myself out in overdrive. And so just through some conversations, like talking to the doctor, things like that, kind of went down the road, and comes out with ADHD. So, which was, for me, it was
surprising?
A positive. It was surprising, I would say, because ADHD didn't look like what I thought it did in my brain. I had I have a brother who's autistic. So I think I kind of had that lens of, somebody who can't sit still in their seat, somebody who bouncing around all the time, from idea to idea. And that wasn't what I was doing. But also realizing ADHD or neurodivergent conditions in general are so underdiagnosed within women. We're not finding out until we're in our 30s or older. I recently read an article that said there's been a 400% increase in adults seeking support for ADHD in the last 3 years. That's huge.
That is. And I'm sure the whole COVID thing didn't help, because I think it magnifies everything. But it's interesting that you said it's kind of a mixed blessing. It gives you the ability to focus for a longer period of time and maybe, more intently, but then you also get burned out. So you've got a positive and a negative with that. So
Absolutely.
that's
And
an interesting.
I think was recognizing my own difference and being able to at that point advocate for myself. So being able to speak to, my leaders, like, here's how I work best. Here's kind of the environment. And it wasn't big changes. It was mostly changes within myself, I would say, of just expectations, like kind of knowing how I work. Okay, set your days up that way. Set your days up where you can be your most impactful. But now I have a reason why. I wasn't walking away from that day like, oh, something's wrong with me. Like, why did this happen this way? Because my job was getting done. I mean, I was hitting my goals, surpassing my goals, especially in the position I'm in now in talent acquisition. That was hitting my goals wasn't the issue. It was me being down on myself for having expectations that my days should look a certain way. They should look like everyone else's.
And I think a lot of people have issues with when are you best and when are you not best. And sometimes we ignore that. Like you said, our job is defined a certain way. And instead of thinking, how can I do my job the best? We just kind of go with the flow or whatever. So this forced you to do something I think we should all do, is find when we work the best and
Absolutely.
when we can be the most focused. And then when we can afford to not be as focused and we don't have as much responsibility. So it sounds like that really, like you said, put a hyper focus on that.
Absolutely. And I think if we can write down, one thing I started writing down was, what does a good day look like for me? What does a successful day look like? And being able to share that with, your leader, yourself, things like that, was super impactful to be able to have that own knowledge for myself.
And a lot of this does depend on good leadership because
100%. Deal breaker there.
And it's just so huge. And especially it seems so ironic in sales that we talk about how the customer should be treated, customer focus. We want to find out what's really best for them. But if you are in a culture where they don't walk the talk on that, it makes it really hard. And I think people lose really great employees.
Absolutely.
And so good on them, your employer, and how flexible they've been and understanding on that, because they've been a winner in that.
Absolutely. And I think that our company has done a really good job, I think, through our D&I efforts. This last year, I was privileged enough to be co-chair of a business resource group for neurodiversity, which really does help provide leadership education surrounding how to support your employees on that human level, because at the end of the day, there's 7,000 of us. There are 7,000 employees here. And if 20% of humans right now, and that's a kind of a generous number, are neurodivergent, that's a huge need for the company. That's close to 1,400 employees that this is impacting, that we don't want to lose. We don't want to lose those people just due to a different way of thinking.
Right. That's very significant. I do want to touch on something, and I told you the time is going to fly, and it is flying.
Absolutely.
But I was so intrigued when you talked about recruiting employees, because I kind of think of that as, the applicant has to sell themselves to you, and it's just kind of a one-way thing. So can you go over how you explained it to me?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I will.
Well, I could refresh you that you're selling them a future. You're selling them a future. You're caring about them. Again, it's not about what the company, this is what we do, what we want. I also am concerned about you as an employee being happy here and fitting in and having your needs served. And you were really focused on that.
Yeah, I think that's my main goal when I'm speaking to candidates is, yes, we want to make sure that they're a good fit, but also we want to make sure that they feel comfortable with the value add that they're bringing to our company. I believe we work for an incredible company in so many areas, but we still have to be able to feed into the human aspect of who we're bringing on. How are we going to keep them? What are we doing to retain them? And it does have to work both ways. Yes, we want them to bring, it's a job. They need to provide a value there. But how can we add a value to them and their families? One of the most impactful things is when you call and offer a candidate a job and they start crying because it is providing a future for their families. And I think I put myself back in that. Like, I was given a yes. I was given an opportunity, and it has completely changed my life. Like, I would not be where I am now if I didn't get that yes. And that's what I think of, like, how beautiful is that to be able to provide that to other people and sell them on an experience that we can deliver on as a company, not just kind of some pipe dreams of like, here's who we are, but like, we truly have the infrastructure to be able to give them what we promised them as employees, not just taking what we can take from them and then be done.
Right. Your experience, like you said, empathy is a huge word in sales. And your position doesn't say sales now, but when you talked to me about it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is totally sales. You are,
Absolutely.
and really able to empathize. And I think that is true a lot, that the tough times we go through make us stronger, make us more sensitive to what other people are going through. And again, you must be very, very appreciative of the culture that Holman has, because it sounds like it's company wide. And so that's hard to do with a big company like that.
Absolutely. And I think, putting myself into a candidate's shoes, like, yes, they are providing, a value to my life. And I've been able to have an environment where I'm able to add value to the company back as well. So it feels like a two-way relationship, not just like I have an employer, but truly have support, which is all you can ask for somewhere that you give so much of your day to.
Right. But when you have that, there studies show too that kind of a culture and the support and the things you're talking about can also almost be more valuable than money to people.
Absolutely.
The way they feel about themselves. You spend a lot of time at your job, right? So
Absolutely.
if they're happy, that's great for them. And of course, your company invests a lot of money into hiring and training someone. I'm sure it's a big loss when people leave, and then you have to go through that all over again.
Absolutely. And people have the opportunity to work so many places. There's so many, car manufacturers and auto groups that they can go work for. And so it is sales in why work for us? What do we have that is unique or different in the auto industry to offer? And we do have a lot. So I'm very grateful for that.
We didn't talk a lot about Holman. We just have a few minutes. I want to ask you one more question, then maybe you can just give us a little overview of Holman. But I wanted to ask you how being a woman in this industry has affected you. Has it been a positive, a negative, neutral?
Probably at all times, all the above at different times. I would say when I first started, when I first started in sales, I think Katie and I were actually the only two female sales consultants at that time. And it was different. I would say even from a management standpoint, Katie had been doing this a long time. She knew what she was doing. But, there were the statements sometimes of, you're emotional, you're this, you're that. And I was like, okay, I have the same reaction as a male counterpart. You're not saying that to them. But then also, like, I do feel like as I learned to set boundaries for myself, even as an employee, and we dealt with that with customers too, being treated a different way, good, bad, or indifferent sometimes for being a female. You deal with some challenging situations in that. So it has been tricky, I will say. There's a lot of liberties people take sometimes, feeling like they can say things or do certain things because you're a female, which are not okay.
Right.
So I think, it's had its challenges. I think also there's a beauty to it too. On the other side of that, we are able to, I think, naturally, me being more empathetic, naturally connect with people just from being a woman. And so in some ways, I do feel like it's an advantage being able to connect with people on that level, maybe a little sooner than some of like our male counterparts at some points. But it's come with its challenges. It's a historically a male dominated industry. And I think you just have to kind of fight for yourself a little bit sometimes and stick up for yourself and build that resiliency and like, no, I deserve a seat at this table. I have a value to add. And here's why that is, and not be intimidated by the room that you're sitting in. You're there for a reason.
Right. And one of the young women I just interviewed, she said that she was at a trade show and a customer came up and she's standing by a male counterpart, and the customer kept asking the male counterpart, and he said, no, she's the Newmar rep. And he still kept talking to the man. And I thought, wow, good. You need the support from men like that too.
Totally.
She's the one. And,
Absolutely.
I was in a male dominated industry many years ago, and pluses and minuses. My book is called Uncopyable, Uncopyable Sales. And so if you can be unique or different, I think that helps you in some ways. You do have some battles for sure.
Absolutely.
And I think hopefully they aren't quite as bad as they were back in the day. But I like your take on that. And again, I like the fact that Katie, who is also super successful, is such a big supporter of yours. So that's great.
Absolutely.
So just since you are a recruiter, I'd just like to give you a minute to just talk a little bit about Holman and what opportunities that you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. So Holman is an automotive dealer group. So we've been around for this year's our 100th year anniversary.
You don't look that old.
I know, right? I look good. Definitely, I was not here at the beginning. So they started off in New Jersey, which is where our headquarters still is, with a Ford dealership. So now they've expanded to across the country, also have a fleet management side of the company, which is global manufacturing and distribution. Entity of the company, they've grown to about 7,000 employees now, and a lot of opportunities for our employees. For current employees, they're very big on promoting from within. So I'm super grateful for that. And I think that's a good selling point as a recruiter as well. That there is a way to build a career here for your family, and for yourself. So, and it is a family-owned business, and they make everyone want to feel like they are family, which I think they've done a really great job at overall.
We do have some clients that are family-owned businesses, and it really does feel different to me, the family-owned factor. I think there is
Absolutely
a culture, a caring, a level of involvement that isn't always there with a conglomerate. So
absolutely agree.
I will include your contact information in the show notes of this episode. So, if anyone's interested, Rebekah was given a chance. Maybe she'll give you a chance too.
Absolutely. I would love to speak to whoever would like to speak to me.
Well, the time has flown by. And so I'm going to say thank you so much for all the nuggets that you have shared. And a lot of people say gold nuggets. Our color is orange. So you shared orange nuggets that not only information, but I think encouragement, how you have worked through some of the tough times and, come out so far ahead and become a success when at one time, like you said, maybe your path could have gone two different ways. You had to hear a yes, and you got that yes, and it's made all the difference in the world. So Rebekah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kay. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Sales, your source for secrets you can use to make more sales. Check the show notes for links and contact information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. You can always learn more by going to uncopyablesales.com/podcast. Until next time, go out and supercharge your sales like a true uncopyable rock star.